Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Welcome to the second episode of the Wellness Check series. Tara, fact check muna. Brought to you by the Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Service and the Bureau of Human Resources and Organizational Development Employee Welfare Division with the support of the Public Affairs Service. I am Joan Yamado from DRRMS. Wellness check na ba kayo? And our guest for today is Mr. Gabriel Billones Jr. and our session is interpreted in Filipino Sign Language by Ms. KZ Meroy. Before we start, let us call in Director Ranil Daco of DRRMS to provide us with the rationale of this webinar. Good morning, Director Ronnie.
Magandang umaga po sa lahat ng ating tagapanood ng ating Wellness Check. Kaya ito natin ginagawa ang Wellness Check every week, para po dito pangalagaan natin ang ating mental health, para sa gayon ay makapag-function pa rin tayo ng mahusay bilang sa iba't ibang papel na ating ginagampanan. Okay? So ngayon naman, ang ating topic ay tara, fact check muna tayo. Yan, okay? So bakit mahalaga ang fact check? Kasi isa rin po yung news, yung mga balita at o mga nababasa natin na pinanggagalingan ng ating stress or distress. Hindi po ba? Kasi nga, di ba? Gusto naman natin makibalita para hindi tayo nawawala at bahagi nun ay alam natin, ma-inform tayo ano nga pang pwedeng gawin. Ano nang nangyayari sa ating kapaligiran. Lamang sa dami din, dahil sa teknolohiya, sa dami din ng pinanggagalingan ng balita, ay pwede na makaapekto rin ito sa atin, lalong-lalo na yung mga balitang hindi naman pala reliable. Hindi po ba? So, di ba, tinatabi natin, oy, fake news yan. O, saan mo kinuha ang source mo yan at lahat? So, ito po, kaya tayo nagpa-fact check muna. Yan naman. As a way of information, reliable information, knowing reliable information, that helps us also to be stable sa ating mental health, and also informing us how then do we take the precautionary measures, necessary appropriate actions. So ito po yan. So hindi ako magpapaligoy-ligoy pa, kumuha tayo ng eksperto. Diba? Kasi lahat ng ginagawa naman natin dito, kailangan ito yung may kahit paano, yung siya ay, ito yung may kaalaman sa field na ating pinag-uusapan. So, wini-welcome namin si Sir Gabriel Billones Jr., co-founder po ng organization na Break the Fake Movement. Yun. Paano ba ma-distinguish ang fake news sa totoong news. Okay? So welcome, Gabriel, salamat at sa lahat po ng ating mga kawani, mga nanay at mga magulang at kung sino pa man ang inyong mga kasama. Magandang umaga po. Sana may matutunan tayo at makapagdulot ito ng kahusayan, kagalingan para sa ating kaisipan at kalooban.
Thank you very much, Director Ronnie. Ayan. So aside po from COVID-19, we are also facing challenges when it comes to information. Kasi access po to correct information is vital in protecting our mental health. Thus, for today po, we will talk about fighting misinformation or infodemic. Our speaker for today is Mr. Gab Billones Jr. He is a digital marketing consultant, ICT for development specialist, and online entrepreneur. He is the founder of Y-Loop Digital Solutions, a fully virtual agency providing digital marketing and innovation services primarily for social causes and advocacies, and the trainer of the ICT's Digital Jobs PH program. He is also the co-founder and chief organizer of Break the Fake Movement, an independent alliance of young professionals committed to combating the issue of fake news and disinformation by mobilizing youth volunteers and leveraging technology. He is an active alumnus of the Young Southeast Asian Leaders Initiative, member of the Digital Rights Coalition of the Philippines, and a founding member of the Digital Makers Asia Pacific. Hello, Sir Gab. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much, Joanne. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this webinar series. Our topic for today is Tara Fact Check Muna. Okay, and this topic is falling under on fighting the infodemic. So today's discussion, we will be talking about the context, the current media landscape, and the rise of citizen journalism, the new global pandemic, which covers fake news and disinformation, and the reasons why this exists, disinformation versus misinformation versus malinformation. Tapos lastly, we're going to cover responsible digital citizenship and different practical ways to spot and respond to fake news. So the coming of digital age marked the birth of a new global pandemic. We have COVID-19, but this actually gave rise to yung sinabi nga ni Joanne, infodemic, or also called disinfodemic, which specifically covers disinformation, which we will discuss later on. In principle level, maraming harms ng fake news. For example, on a daily basis, we make decisions. Sa context ng COVID-19, this is all about ano yung kinokonsume natin na information on sino yung magsasabi nito, sino yung reliable na source. Pero may mga nire-recycle na mga videos ngayon. For example, it was taken in Ecuador, a video of an old video of a mall raid in Ecuador taken in 2017. And it's instilling public fear because a lot of people think this happened in Pure Gold. Or for example, this video of body bags in New York na akala ng mga tao nangyari sa St. Luke's, di ba? So this is in principle level, it's instilling public fear. On practical level, meron din siyang harms. In Iran, for example, 44 people died because of fake news because they thought yung bootleg alcohol can actually cure the COVID-19 situation. But in that particular province, sa Iran, only 18 people died of COVID. So mas maraming namatay sa fake news. So that's a practical way of demonstrating that fake news can harm you principal level, but also can actually kill you. So according to a study conducted by Statista, and this is where we actually draw the line, over half of the population claim to regularly see fake news on sites such as Facebook and Twitter. But ano nga ba talaga yung media landscape ngayon? Dati, mas hanas tayo sa traditional broadcast media. But ngayon, when we watch Olympics, when we watch large sporting events, we're already seeing multi-screens. So nanonood ka sa TV, meron ka ding tablets, to follow the discussion about the sports. And also another trend na nagra-rise ngayon is instant news. We're into instant consumption of feeds in social media, in different other media channels. There's also rise of app engagement. Maraming taong gumagamit ng mga games, gumagamit ng Mobile Legends. But it's not just gaming. It's also about mga apps for news. Like for example, Inquirer equivalent ng news or many other channels. And lastly, subscriber shift. So ngayon, mas into consuming media content from subscribers tayo, like BuzzFeed, like HuffPost, and many other subscriptions. In the Philippines, we have 73 million internet users, but we're a population of 108 million way back in 2018. So, and then out of that internet users, where 98% are actually accessing the information using their mobile devices. Out of those numbers, 96% are Facebook users. So they use Facebook as their social media of choice. As a matter of fact, sa buong mundo, isa tayo sa pinaka-social media savvy na citizens in the whole world, So that really speaks a lot about the shift in media consumption that we have. But let's go back to the root of this discussion. What is fake news? According to Feynman and Thomas, fake news as it currently exists is a result of the rise of the internet as a source of information and the ability for anyone to post content online to reach an audience. Way back in 2011, mga 2008, mga ganong mga years, na-democratize ang media, and this gave rise to citizen journalism. So everybody is now taking videos, photos. They just want to take instant news, and everybody became suddenly citizen journalists. Okay? But Facebook in and of itself is also a divisive term, and dito natin siya i-categorize. According to Johnson and Kelling, fake news is content that is deliberately false and published on websites that mimic traditional news websites. Ibig sabihin ito, highlight on deliberately false. Meron siyang intention to really harm you or to actually create a situation that will make you believe that it's true, but it's not. Okay? But according to a lot of media practitioners, it's wrong to actually call it fake news because news is supposed to be actual and factual all the time. It's supposed to be founded on factual things or truthful events, you know? But as divisive that term is, when Trump and a lot of Western politicians referred to fake news in 2016, it became so popular that a lot of media practitioners use it to be able to move the needle on media literacy. Okay? So ginagamit natin siya as a term for the sake of discussion. But in terms of accuracy, fake news is not supposed to sit alongside news. Now, let's discuss terms furthermore. There are 3 terms that we have to talk about: disinformation, misinformation, and malinformation. Kapag sinabi mong disinformation, this is information that is false and deliberately created to harm a person, social group, organization, or country. So merong intent to harm a person. Alam nyo, kapag nagka-qualify kayo ng isang crime, the first thing that you're going to look at is the intent to do the crime. In disinformation, you have to qualify that there is an intention to falsify that particular information and make sure that it's delivered to a particular entity. The second thing is misinformation. And this is information na marami tayo nabibiktima. And the reason for that is, maybe na-share natin yung isang news, pero hindi pala siya verified. It's fake, but wala tayong intention na magpalaganap ng something fake. Hindi lang din natin siya na-verify. So you don't have the intention of causing harm, but that information is false. Ibig sabihin, you are a misinformed person. Lastly is malinformation. Information that is based on reality, nangyari siya sa facts, but it's also being done to inflict harm on a person, social group, organization, or country. What you're seeing at the right is a diagram of the digital evolution triangle. For a fake news propaganda to happen, there has to be motivation, merong intent to deliberately falsify, may mga tools and services na ginagamit para mangyari ang fake news, and meron silang channel na tinatawag natin na social networks. Ito yung Facebook, Twitter, and different online channels that they find fit in the conversation. Before I move forward, I'm also going to introduce 3 terms. Number 1 is yung tinatawag natin na sock puppets. Sock puppets is ito yung mga trolls. Yung nakikita niyo yung mga profile picture nila is Korean actress. Tapos yung cover photo is a picture of a nature. They have less than 50 friends and are member of at least 160 organizations of the same kind. They are done and created to inflict harm on other people and stakeholders. Yun yung tinatawag natin na sock puppets. Parang medyas na kinokontrol sila ng isang puppeteer. So they're being manipulated. Number 2, meron tayong tinatawag na filter bubbles. Ito yung biases mo. So each one of us, we all have our own biases. Ang challenge sa'yo is how do you step out of those biases para makapag-engage ka into an open and constructive conversation with someone. So you have to step out of your filter bubbles. Kasi madalas tayo, kapag iba yung opinion ng isang tao, binablock natin, ina-unfollow natin. So you have to challenge your filter bubbles. Third term that I'm going to introduce is echo chambers. Echo chambers naman, ito yung mga groups, mga organizations. It's a metaphorical term, but it's a term that is being used in the media literacy discussion to refer to those groups na same lang sila ng mga opinion. You know, they amplify and echo the same opinions. So yun yung tatawag natin ng echo chambers. Why do people spread fake news? Okay, I mentioned briefly about biases, and lahat tayo may personal biases. You see in the diagram the roots of fake news. One reason is the loss of confidence in traditional media. Kapag hindi nawawala tayo ng trust sa media industry, and by the way, the operationalization of media is always it always roots back to public trust. Kapag nag-erode yung public trust, nag-erode din yung media. Another reason is low levels of critical thinking. As a matter of fact, vulnerable tayo sa Pilipinas kasi wala tayong media literacy na integrated sa ating curriculum. And then there's also shift in business models. Marami ngayon, nakikita mo mga weight loss transformation programs. biglang maraming ads na itong taong to nag-lose siya ng weight like let's say 20 kilos in less than 3 months. Mga ganong examples. A lot of companies, they shift online, but in doing so, they're also vulnerable to doing clickbait headlines. Mind you, fake news is a billion-dollar industry. Maraming kumikita sa fake news. Just so they can generate likes, engagement, posts, and a lot of people will actually follow them. Lastly is malicious actors, and I'm going to briefly discuss this later. For you to be able to propagate fake news, you need to have a channel, that's a social media. So nakikita niya siya sa branch. And then ang mga resulta nito sa leaves are rumors, hoaxes, information, at saka disinformation. These are a couple of examples and reasons why fake news exists. Website traffic and ad revenue, propaganda, which is being used mostly on political reasons. But alam niyo yung fake news, nagsimula yan hindi 3 years ago or 5 years ago. Nagsimula siya decades ago as a wartime strategy. So ginagamit na siya ng mga military. But lately lang siya ginagamit na information weaponry. So that's one way, political propaganda. Another is satire or parody, so entertainment purposes. So marami mga websites na naglilipana to be able to create entertaining news, but on the process, they're also spreading fake news. And then, sloppy journalism. Ito naman yung talagang accidental na mistakes ng mga journalism. Mind you, journalists are supposed to follow a certain bureaucratic process of approval for content. Pero kapag may mga mistakes, yun yung tinatawag natin na hindi nila sinasadya. For example, in this picture, this is a picture of comparison between PWDs in Australia and kinumpare sila dun sa mga beneficiaries na victims ng war. And tinawag sila na slackers ng Daily Telegraph. So nag-react yung PWD community and they thought it's a sloppy journalism. Also, misleading na headings. So ito, for example, mga exaggerated na claims, yung mga sinasabi na ito yung cure sa COVID-19, yan yung mga misleading na headings, yung puro clickbaits. And then we also talk about personalized targeting. Kung manonotice niyo sa social media feed ninyo, bakit most of the time yung mga interests mo before, lumalabas siya sa feed mo? Or for example, yung mga previous na sinearch mo, lumalabas siya sa feed mo. Okay? So these are the malicious actors. We have cyberbully, troll, scammer, predator. And you have to identify or at least have a knowledge kung anong difference ng apat. Cyberbully, madalas nagpo-post ng mga negative comments. They actually launch ad hominem attacks. Instead of talking about the conversation, sinasabi nila na pangit ka, wala kang pinag-aralan. Yun yung mga tinatawag natin na cyberbully. They don't engage you on the topic, but they engage you on your personalization or personal character, you know? And ito yung tinatawag natin na, that's na cyberbullying. Another kind is trolls. Ang trolls naman, they exist to actually copy a certain script. Madalas, walang sense to engage with a troll because they are just really doing this for money. You know, as like what I've said, fake news is a billion-dollar industry. They're being paid to post negative comments. Even if you engage with them, they already follow a certain rule or a script that will actually demerit everything that you said. So walang point of conversation, walang point of engagement. Thirdly, scammer, yung mga nare-receive mo ng mga spam emails galing sa Nigeria or sa other countries about prince giving you bank accounts, money from their bank accounts, yung mga ganong kinds of scams. Or even locally, yung mga nagte-text sa'yo randomly, sinasabi na nanalo ka sa loto, di ba? And then fourthly is predator. Yung mga nagsascam sa vulnerable, they predate on someone who is vulnerable to all of these scamming online. So, sinasabi nila na we're going to set you up, or mga sexual predators din, mga ganon. So they prey on young people, young women, or mga kids, mga ganon. So there are three elements of fake news: mistrust, misinformation, manipulation. So how do we combat fake news? The single biggest answer to combating fake news is critical thinking and responsible use of social media. A lot of technologists before, they argued that the first line of defense in fighting fake news is technology. But as a matter of fact, and this was refuted by a certain case, an Altiposten case. It was a case of picture of a Vietnamese girl taken way back in Vietnamese War. She was running from this war, and it's all about it was very moving, but then it's also a picture of a photography documentary. It was taken down by Facebook because Facebook thought in its community guidelines na this is child pornography. But the context ng picture na yon is actually a photography documentary of the Vietnamese War. So ibang context nun. That's the reason why you can't really rely on technology, because even technology itself has its own guidelines. For example, social media has its own strict rules on operationalization, but there are ways to be able to curtail that, and we can talk about that in the Q&A. Infographic summary on spotting fake news. These are some of the ways that you can spot fake news, but we will deal with them one by one. Tip number 1, be skeptical of the headlines. For example, when you read in these headlines, all Fridays of 2018 declared as national holidays, red flag kapag exaggerated yung claim. Kapag talaga ba lahat ng Fridays ng isang taon, i-declare na national holidays, kapag caps lock lahat, at tapos maraming exclamation marks like that, for example, red flag din yan. So be skeptical of the headlines. And then this is a classic example. This happened last year. There was a fake news in Cagayan de Oro. It's a fake news about HIV test tubes randomly thrown out into the sea. And ngayon, a lot of people are actually afraid of consuming fishes because they thought kapag kakain sila ng fish, they will also get AIDS, you know? So, nirefute siya ng Department of Health. They said, that's not true. You don't. It's safe to eat fish, and HIV cannot be transmitted through water or food. So that's one harm that happened, and it's a localized example of fake news. Tip number 2, look closely at URLs. So merong structure ang domains, ang URLs. For example, www.notveryreliablenews.org/2. Most companies, they actually use yung tinatawag natin na SSL, Secure Sockets Layer. Tingnan nyo yung browser URL sa taas, may padlock icon dyan. Madalas naka-green. For example, common example, Facebook. Tingnan nyo sa taas, doon sa browser, may padlock dyan. Ibig sabihin yan, naka-HTTPS yung website na yan, Secure Socket Layer. That's the single biggest defense, you know, in proving that your company is actually verified by ICANN. And then, yeah, so make sure that there is, most of the companies, organizations, yung websites nila actually acquire SSL. So we have a network, it's called International Fact-Checking Network, and they verify organizations na reliable or hindi reliable. These are classic examples of sites na nag-spread ng fake news, and kung titingnan nyo yung commonality nila, naka-HTTP sila, wala silang SSL. So what's your ways? Number 1, check if the website is secure. Check if there is padlock icon dun sa taas. Number 2, check the other accounts of reliable media sources. Tingnan mo sa mga social media accounts, for example, if you're checking on Globe, tingnan mo yung social media ng Globe kung yun ba talaga yung website na pinopromote nila. So do some cross-checking. Thirdly, check the URL if it's listed as somewhere as a fake news site, tulad ng list na to. And then third tip, investigate the source. So you have to look at sino yung nasi-spread na to. Ngayon, kung echo chamber, like for example, messenger groups, tingnan mo kung sino nag-share at ano yung mga biases ng taong to, bakit niya sinishare yung fake news na yan. Tip number 4, watch for unusual formatting. Madalas, sinabi ko na sa inyo, ang fake news, capitalization, heavy use or intense use of exclamation marks and things like that. Madalas marami ding mga spelling and grammar mistakes. So tingnan nyo yung mga formatting issues ng content na kinukonsume ninyo. So ito yung bullet list natin, bad English, capitalized letters, exclamation marks. Consider the images. Tingnan nyo yung images na ginamit. Ito ba ay old photo, tapos pinalabas na nangyari lang siya just recently, which is a common way of spreading fake news. One way to do that, meron tayong tawag na reverse image checking. May mga tools para magamit yan, yung tinatawag natin na TinEye or RevEye, reverse image search. Kapag ginamit mo yun, upload mo lang yung image doon, tapos sasabihin niya kung saang other web pages nag-appear yung image na yun. So malalaman mo, na-recycle ba tong picture na to or hindi. This is a classic example. For example, on using a certain photo na nangyari siya way before, and it's being sold out as nangyari just recently. This picture was taken in 2015, but dito, pinalabas siya na nangyari siya sa SEA Games. So, ang intention naman ng person na to or character na to is that he wanted to portray SEA Games as a flop. Therefore, he used this image to say na nangyari to sa SEA Games and the entire SEA Games is a failure, you know? So this is one way of how fake news exists. Check the date. You have to look at kailan yung news na yan nangyari, tapos is it something that happened just recently, or is it something that happened way before in the past? And then check evidence and look at other reports. Meron bang other reports na nagre-report ng same situation or wala? For example, kung reliable talaga yung news na yan, most likely marami ng media sources na nag-cover ng particular item na yan. And then, is the story a joke? Kapag joke siya, malalaman mo naman kasi talagang may mga satire or parody or intentional na deliberate ba siya or parang ano lang, parang does it cause harm or talagang ano lang siya, just for the point of entertainment. And then some stories are intentionally false, right? So, ito yung mga news stories na ginagamit na false, repackaged as being false. Pero there are exceptions, you know? Like for example, on April's Fool's Day, and a lot of brands and companies are spreading some fake news, but in a satire and parodic way. So you have to be able to identify kung ano yung intention ng nagsasabi. If you think that a certain post is fake, this is what you have to do. May drop-down menu sa Facebook. Yung drop-down menu, sinasabi na click next to the posting questions. Click mo yan, tapos merong icon dyan, may option to report a certain post. And then you can say that it shouldn't be on Facebook. You can say that it's a false news story. Does Facebook automatically take them down? No. Because according to community guidelines, they still have to review it. So may proper vetting naman. Hindi naman nababan agad yung account na yun. How do you respond when a close friend or family shares fake news? I'm going to discuss that in our Q&A. But there are ways to practice positive online discourse. So alamin mo kung sino yung audience mo. Place yourself in other shoes. At the end of the day, you have to be open. Walang way for you to block or unfollow lahat ng mga friends mo na iba yung opinion sa'yo. And you have to also be sensitive to the environment. Sino yung nagre-receive ng messages mo? Are they going to be receptive of the message, or are they going to be angry about it, or are they going to be inspired? Meron ngang rule sa amin sa digital marketing. If your post is not inspirational, educational, or informative, then maybe it's not worth posting, diba? So if you just wanted to incite jealousy, then don't post it. And let's talk about practicing news detox in times of crisis, diba? Kasi hindi naman pwedeng laban ng lahat. So you have to manage your news consumption. The first suggestion to that is give yourself time to switch off. Wag puro online 24/7. Maybe you have to go out, plant flowers, or cook food, yung mga favorite recipes mo, or just talk to your loved ones, okay? Allocate some time to do some digital detox. Another thing is to dive deep, you know? Kung hindi naman, kasi meron tayong tinatawag na ad fatigue, consume ka ng mga content sa lahat ng mga devices, just limit consumption. Focus ka sa isang newspaper, and that's it, you know? And then read it from the top to the bottom. And then thirdly, connect. Use social media wisely by communicating with families and friends instead of bashing other people and engaging with trolls, you know? And then fourthly, interrogate. Always ask the question, what's the best source of the information I absolutely need to know? Isa sa mga gullible sources ng information, yung mga echo chamber groups, yung mga buy and sell groups. Kasi anyone can post in these groups. So dapat tanungin mo, ano ba yung mga credible na sources na magsasubscribe ka, right? And then, ito bang traditional media outlet na to, is it credible or not? You have to ask those questions. And then be mindful. Bear in mind the well-being of every person that will receive the status or the post messages that you post online. So these are the references that I used. These are actually accessible in the SlideShare account that you can access in the QR code. And thank you so much for joining this webinar series. I'm open to answering your questions. And this is the QR code.
Thank you very much po, Sir Gav, for that informative and timely discussion. Dahil po sa karamihan ay gumagamit ng internet at social media ngayon, no, hindi po talaga natin may makokontrol ang mga information na nababasa, napapanood, or naririnig natin. Katulad po ngayon, marami nakaka-relate dito, no? Kasi yung mga kaibigan at kapamilya natin, share na mismo nung iba't ibang information. So, paano po kung yung kaibigan or kakilala or kapamilya natin ay nag-share ng fake news? Ano po kaya ang pwede natin gawin aside po from reporting like what you mentioned earlier?
Okay. So that's really very tricky question, no? Kasi lahat tayo, meron tayong mga kapamilya, mga cousins, mga relatives na iba-iba yung opinion. Obviously, the first thing you're going to do is to look at the person, engage muna the person, hindi muna yung idea niya. Look at why ang person na yan yung sinasabi niya. Because, di ba, like what I've said, all of us have biases. Whether you like it or not, we all have to filter bubbles. So we can't all agree on everything. Maybe we have differences in religion and political affiliation, sa lahat ng mga bagay. But the thing is, how do you reconcile those differences is really what matters. So after you look at the person and understanding where this person is coming from, you have to step back and understand ano yung common grounds ninyo. Kasi baka ikaw din, maklouded ka na ng judgment mo. Ito talaga, walang hiya tong person na to. Ganon, kasi yun yung sinasabi niya. No, the case is you have to look at the common ground between the two of you. And then you have to engage the logic. And then put the argument into context. Ano yung konteksto na pinag-uusapan nyo? Are you talking about media? Are you talking about a certain industry? Ito bang taong to, expert sa field na yan, na kina-question mo? Kasi baka naman nagmamagaling ka lang sa isang bagay na hindi ka naman magaling. Di ba? Always put the argument into context. And then lastly, kapag sobrang toxic, by the way hindi lahat ng tao okay to makipagdebate sa Facebook. Okay? So you also have to respect the person. Kapag ayaw ng person na yan mapahiya, doon na kayo mag-aaway. So always respect. Maybe what you'd want to take the conversation into, say pag-usapan natin to offline, you know? And then lastly, pick your battles. Choose your battles. Hindi naman lahat ng mga post, mga away sa Facebook kailangan mong i-engage with. You have to choose kung ano yung i-respond mo or hindi. Sometimes silence is the best answer. Di ba?
Thank you po, Sir Gab, no? Kasi nakaka-relate ako dyan. Okay, so ito po, na-mention niyo din kanina no, na may mga cyberbullies, may trolls, may mga scammers. So, ito po, kasi ang daming naglipaan na nito ngayon. Ano po ang pwedeng gawin kapag nabubuli po tayo or dinudumog tayo ng mga trolls sa ating social media? Kasi for example, nag-post tayo ng something tapos bigla tayong dinumog ng mga trolls.
Okay. I always say this. What you can afford to say offline, say it online. Okay? Kung ang tapang-tapong mo online, pero hindi ka naman matapang offline, then don't say it, right? Kasi you deserve what you're actually saying. You know, you will always you will bear the brunt of the effects of what you're saying online. Your online identity is only an extension of your personal identity. So, because of that, you have to be responsible. Kung ano yung digital footprint mo, it will stay forever dyan, you know? So, always closely align. I-check mo yung digital reputation mo and how different is that to what you can afford to say offline. Kapag sinabi mo yan and you feel so strong about it, you feel so right na kailangan mo sabihin, say it. But with dignity, with respect, and exercising the community guidelines of social media and practice empathy. Alamin mo kung sino yung audience mo. Is this post going to be public or is this going to be private? Kapag gusto mo mag-engage pero friends lang, more likely hindi ka dudumugin ng mga trolls. Pero kapag ginawa mong public yung post mo, welcome trolls. Okay? Ibig sabihin, welcome ka to anyone who can actually say anything about your post. And that could still be okay kung kaya mo. But like what I've said, you're entitled to your own sanity. Kung hindi mo naman kayang sagutin lahat or naapektuhan ka sa mga sinasabi nila, just filter it. Don't have to engage with everything. Just filter the audience of the posts, and you don't have to respond to it. But like what I've said, kung kailangan mo na mag-respond, stick to what you're saying and back it up with facts. Wag fake news.
Thank you po. So it's like really picking or choosing your own battles, so pagdating din sa social media, and of course really dapat fully informed tayo sa mga bagay-bagay, no? So ayan. Okay, so we will now entertain questions from our viewers, no? So ito po, mula po kay Jerfal Chan ng Division of Parañaque. The question is, what measures are done by Facebook to stop trolls from proliferating?
Good question. That's very nice. Actually, our organization is in partnership with Facebook. We are launching a vlogging competition. But it's not the first time that Facebook has been doing something. It has its own community guidelines. Totoo yan. It has its own social media rules. But na-notice nyo ngayon, at the time of the pandemic, yung sa top ng feed nyo, nandun yung COVID-19 updates. Ibig sabihin yan, ginagawa ng Facebook, tinitailor fit niya yung algorithm niya para mabasa mo yung pinaka-reliable sources of content. So ito yung mga content na galing sa reliable and credible institutions like World Health Organization and Department of Health. Ito yung mga pinaka-reliable na organizations. So that's one, tailor-fitting their algorithm. Number two, they also are creating a lot of modules for media literacy. As a matter of fact, a couple of the slides that I shared, na-notice nyo, galing yun sa Facebook. Yes. Yung Digital Tayo is a program made by Facebook, and we're all able to access that. For you, media literacy educators and teachers, you can access the link digitaltayo.fb.com. A lot of files and modules are there regarding the responsible digital citizenship, spotting fake news, exercising critical thinking, and many other topics. So hopefully ma-access nyo yung mga topics na yun. Thirdly, Facebook is actually enabling a lot of fact-checking organizations and media literacy institutions. And sinabi ko na sa inyo, our organization is actually a recipient of a grant from Facebook. And Facebook is actually in partnership with Pointer Initiative, which runs the International Fact-Checking Network. So they actually hold, or parang sila yung nagsasanction sa mga fact-checking organizations and help them be enabled. Sila yung nagde-declare ng mga database ng mga fact-checking na websites and things like that. So maraming ginagawa ang Facebook. If you're expecting something as easy as browser extension na may warning agad, it's not as easy as that. Like what I've said, technology is a very tricky landscape, and yung fake news, it's sitting on a slippery slope na even Facebook is having a hard time to deal with. It's a global pandemic. Even the first world countries like Singapore and the US are suffering from this pandemic. So in other countries like Germany, they actually hold social media companies accountable for taking down fake news content. So iba-iba yung konteksto. But whether Facebook is doing something to talk about fake news, yes, they're doing something.
Thank you po. Ayan, ito naman po a question from Sir Abraham C. Gino Jr. from Bangui National High School. Is there an agency that's supposed to police fake news and make the source accountable?
Okay. In terms of, let's do two things, okay? Number one, there is, like what I've said, an agency. It's what you call IFCN, International Fact-Checking Network. Dito sa Pilipinas, there are two fact-checking organizations that are verified under IFCN. That's what you call Vera Files and Rappler. They're sanctioned under IFCN. And another thing is, also the government is actually doing a lot to fight fake news. In the National Bureau of Investigation, NBI, there's a cybercrime unit that actually looks at mga fake news purveyors and peddlers. So you have to be more careful, especially ngayon at the time of COVID-19, and when you're spreading fake news, you can actually be summoned by FBI. In New York, actually, the Attorney General of New York has released a lot of cease and desist orders to a lot of companies who have been commercializing out from this pandemic. Yung mga nagbebenta ng mga toothpaste na cure sa COVID-19, mga ganun false claims. Tapos kumikita sila. New York actually summoned them and ordered them to cease and desist. So yes, the government is doing in many different parts of the world. And locally, we have NBI, cybercrime, and agencies-wise, we have the international fact-checking organizations.
Thank you po. Ano. So ayan, sa ating mga viewers, please, ayan, kung meron po kayong katanungan, share it with us. Ayan, meron po dito mula kay Mr. Arnel Bandiola. Ito, what would you advise to be done if a fake news finds its way in an official FB page of a division? Sir, can we answer this po in behalf of DepEd? Ayan. So, kung meron po kayong mga nalaman or mga nakitang Facebook page na DepEd related, paki-alert po agad ang page, at kapag hindi po na-take down, tumawag na po tayo sa division natin. Baka ma-miss lang po nung nag-post yung kanyang posting. Magtulungan po tayo sa pagmatyag ng ating mga Facebook channels para po magprotektahan din po natin ang Department of Education. At ito nga po, sinabi kanina ni Sir Gab, gusto lang natin i-highlight na your online identity is only extension of your personal identity. Kaya pakalagaan po natin ang ating sarili, lalong-lalo na po sa pag-share ng mga information. Ayan. Okay, so ito po, isa po pong question po mula sa ating viewer, Sir Gab, mula po kay Ms. Aida Aguinaldo Madrid, mula po sa Division of Ilocos Norte. Ayan. Nowadays po, marami po ang nahack na account. For example, nahack po ang personal account ni ma'am, and then suddenly, yung hacker po nag-start mag-share ng fake news. Ano daw po ang dapat gawin pag ganito, sir?
Yes, pag ganyan, talagang cybercrime unit na yan. Okay? Because it's a personal threat, you know? Alam niyo ba yung nangyari recently, yung attacks against, yung pinost ni Angel Locsin, na she's actually receiving all of these threats na pinapapatay sila, di ba? Ganon, mga artists. That's an example of a really, really bad threat, you know? And this is not different to fake news. Kapag yung isang tao, ginamit yung account mo at personal and sensitive data about sa'yo, you can actually go to NBI and then have them the cybercrime unit, meron silang anti-fake news task force, specifically for different purposes, but for fake news alone. And a lot of governments are actually doing suit. They're following suit. They're doing the same. They have their own cybercrime unit to look at yung mga cases na ganito, na inaabuso sila, bina-blackmail sila based on their personal identity. Ginagamit yung mga sensitive data nila to be able to blackmail someone. Go to NBI because they're the best institution to actually help you on that issue. Hindi kami, because we're a fact-checking organization. Hindi namin mapa-fact-check kasi personal data mo yan. Always go to the authorities, lalo na sa mga extreme cases.
Thank you po. So ito naman po, sir, a question from Ms. Karen Alvaro from Ilocos Norte pa din. Ito po, with regards po sa mga learners natin. How to educate grade school learners about fake news and social media hazards in time of pandemic? Kasi kahit po mga grade schoolers ngayon, meron na ding mga social media accounts.
Yes. You know, in the US, there's a lot of movement to involve the parents in the discussion. For example, ang classic example dito, yung tinatawag natin, yung organization na commonsense.org. Meron silang mga modules na hindi lang particular for media literacy educators. Meron ding tools para sa mga parents. So this is where I actually suggest things. Sa Pilipinas kasi, wala tayong masyadong tools exclusively for parents. And even if there are online modules for media literacy for parents, most of them are actually paid. So may mga bayad. which is not the case here. Kasi sa context ng Pilipinas, hindi tayo masyadong into paying things para ma-access yung information na yan. Lalo na kung alam natin na you can actually search things in Google, ba't mo pagagamitin yan? That makes us more vulnerable to consuming fake news. The harm there is paano kapag yung anak mo, siya naman yung nakakuha ng fake news without any knowledge or any parental guidance, right? So that's where your role as a parent comes in. There are a lot of parents who actually do homeschooling or yung parenting nila, sinasabayan nila yung mga anak nila in consuming content, tapos nagli-limit din sila ng mga apps na allowed i-access ng mga anak nila. So maybe you can check ano tong mga apps na ginagamit ng anak ko. Facebook. If Facebook, meron din siyang age requirement, di ba? So bakit mag-aano yung anak mo sa Facebook, right? And kung sa games naman, alam nyo sa games may mga chat options na din. Pwede ka din mabash doon ng mga cyberbullies, lalo na sa Mobile Legends. So alam mo, bullying can happen anywhere. Fake news can happen anywhere. You have, as a parent, you have to be mindful kung ano yung kinukonsume na apps or mga content ng anak mo. You have to regulate it. And hopefully soon, kasi meron kaming partnership with the US Embassy, we're launching an online portal for Filipino parents to be able to help them educate their kids on media literacy.
That's a good a good program na makakatulong po sa ating mga parents and learners on how to combat this hazards in social media and in fake news. Ayan. So ito po, Sir Gab, bilang advocacy niyo po yung paglaban sa fake news, no? Ano niyo po, paano niyo po na-maintain ang inyong mental health, lalo na po ngayong merong pandemic?
Okay. Yun, iba-iba tayo ng coping strategies, no? I tell you what, we humans, we are wired to actually think negatively all the time. That's our survival mode. Alam mo yun? So for example, kapag may lion sa likod mo, ganun, we're always think about mapapatay ako ng lion na to. Hindi ka mag-iisip positively na baka hindi niya ako kakainin, mga ganun. So survival mode tayo all the time, you know? So I believe lahat tayo, meron tayong coping strategies. You maybe, Joanne, maybe you love gardening or cooking, di ba? On my case, on my mental health, I really do digital detox. There's always a time in my, when I'm sleeping, I actually just turn off all the devices, make sure that there's no one who could actually interrupt my sleep by calling me randomly. Mm-hmm. And then, so that's one thing that you can do, digital detox. Limit your consumption of media, of news. Actually, I suggest dalawang sources of information and then stop, you know. Just maintain the credible sources lang. And then use social media wisely. Gamitin mo yung mga social media to be able to communicate with your family and friends. Don't be so online all the time. Kasi you can connect, but you can also disconnect and actually maintain your mental wellness. And then thirdly, yung mga bagay na hindi mo ginagawa dati that you think will be able to help you thrive, like maglaro ka ng video games. Maybe it's one thing to actually keep you busy, you know? Sa DICT, sinasuggest namin ngayon, maglaro ka ng video games as a pastime, hindi as an addiction. Okay? And then, mag-explore ka ng mga bagong hobbies. Maging chef ka. Sabi ko nga on one of my talks with the US Embassy, after this pandemic, we're all gonna come out strong as chefs, gardeners, painters, everybody who's pursuing different hobbies after this pandemic. So that's how we could actually tap on our creative side because of this COVID-19 situation. Just looking at the bright side of things.
Okay, thank you very much po, Sir Gab. No? Ayan, tama po kayo. Ayan, so mga kasama po natin ngayon, mga viewers, please ask questions pa rin po. Ayan, live na live pa rin po tayo sa DepEd Philippines Facebook page. So eto, meron po tayo ditong question mula pa po sa Lanao del Norte kay Ms. Jahara Ontong. Eto po, how can you know the link you receive has a virus? Kasi marami po ang nag-share nito, sir. Lalo na sa Messenger or ayan, may mga virus po or scam. Kasi, ayun.
Okay.
Ano niyo po malalaman yun? Kasi,
yes,
ayan, nakita ko pa lang ito kahapon sa Twitter.
That's very tricky, ah. That's very that's a case-to-case basis. Lalo na kapag, for example, teacher mo dati tapos nag-send sa'yo ng link, parang wala, i-open ko ba to? Teacher ko to. Siguro alam naman niya, di ba? Lalo na sa mga teacher audience natin ngayon, di ba? Misinformation. Akala natin totoo pero hindi pala. Well, number one, I just want to say I studied in Lanao del Norte, so hello sa mga taga-Iligan at sa nagtanong. Thank you so much for that question. It's very timely. Madalas kapag yung link na sinishare, may mga warning signs, okay? Hindi siya nagka-come out as link lang eh. Like, saan galing yung link? Is it a link that is shared sa Facebook or sa Messenger? Okay? Kasi di ba sinabi ko na kanina, kapag sinare sa Facebook feed, like dyan sa feed mismo, sa Facebook feed mo, may mga warning signs like all caps lahat, maraming exclamation marks, tapos parang, for example, adobochronicles.com, parang ganun, mga parang hindi naman kapanipaniwala na links. Or for example, and ito naman yung tricky, kasi madalas sa mga fake news sites, they always try to portray as the real one. Like for example, yung totoong website ng The Guardian, yung paper sa UK, ni-replace lang yung I with 1. So akala ng mga tao, ito yung totoong link. Kasi yung I at 1, madaling maswap, di ba? So you really have to use your eye and look clearly, tama ba tong link na to? And then visit the social media page. Actually, and in most cases, ang credible na social media accounts, marami na siyang following. And marami din siyang updates. Kapag bigla na lang nag-appear yung social media page na yan or website na yan, then it's also a red flag or shady. Another suggestion is be careful about the kind of links that you really open sa Messenger. Okay? You don't just randomly open links, but makikita mo naman dun yung shortened version ng link eh. Kapag shortened, like let's say youtube.com, ang lalabas na link yan is you.t tapos / may konting following na characters. Kapag sobrang haba tapos parang may konting image, parang ang haba ng link, you have to be more skeptical. Parang saan ka dadalhin ng website na to? May tinatawag tayo na SSL, di ba? Ito yung nagka-create ng encrypted na channel between your website, the website you're accessing, and the server. Every time you access a certain website, natatrack na yung digital footprint mo, yung user mo, asan ka nakiklik, because you accepted the cookies, di ba? So, by doing so, you give consent to the website to actually look at your user journey, kung saan ka pumupunta sa website nila. But with the SSL, yung HTTPS sa browser ng website mo, na-encrypt yung sensitive data like credit card information, like yung login credentials, like yung first name tapos yung password mo, hindi nila find out yan kasi encrypted nga siya with the SSL. With the absence of SSL, yung HTTP na mga links, you are more sensitive, you are more vulnerable to hacks and a lot of phishing attacks. Lastly, sa emails mo naman, kung sa emails mo na-receive, a lot of email platforms or email providers like Yahoo Mail or Gmail, kapag hindi credible yung isang source or shady yung isang source, napupunta siya sa spam. Because they identify most spam messages, meron siyang common template. So, hindi siya napupunta doon sa main na inbox mo. But if ever it did, you have to look closely kung ano yung messaging doon. Like, eto, madalas kasi kapag fake news, they always love to prey on your emotions. Dapat eto siya, matakot ko siya. Dapat ma-force ko siya magbigay ng pera. Parang ganun. Okay? Dapat mainggit siya. Like weight loss, mga ganun. Or pampalaki ng mga ganun. Mga exaggerated na mga claims. So always step back and exercise a healthy level of caution. At the end of the day, you have to err on the side of caution.
Thank you very much, sir, sa mga advice nyo. No? So ito po, siguro last question natin for today, for you, Sir Gab. Ito po, ano naman po yung advice na may bibigay nyo sa ating mga viewers, lalo na po sa mga kasama nating teachers, on how to protect their mental health ngayon pong meron tayong crisis or pandemya na kinakaharap?
Okay. I'm also a teacher. I teach as a trainer for Department of Information and Communications Technology. We do conduct trainings and help enable freelancers from different countryside communities by equipping them with digital marketing skills and e-commerce skills, and actually promote inclusive economy in the digital age. So for teachers, mas malaki yung accountability natin sa influences natin sa mga immediate communities natin. The worst that can happen to you as a teacher is kung ikaw mismo nagpapalaganap ng fake news. Diba? So, we don't want that to happen. But at the same time, the only way for you to be able to help someone or influence someone is when you are mentally well. So, always ask yourself and self-reflect, ano yung mga bagay na nakapagpapasaya sa'yo. Always think about, maybe you would want to check on your students, because I do that all the time. I play games with my students on a daily basis. We play a lot of video games. So that's one thing. Number two is to actually maybe check on your other co-teachers, right? And then what are they doing? Because at the time of pandemic, the only way for us to keep sanity is when we feel that we have a support system. And ang support system natin is yung family, friends, mga co-workers natin. If we felt lost kasi nawalan tayo ng trabaho, maybe your colleagues have some pieces of advice, and we will always thrive through. But for teachers, I wish that you'd be a good example in terms of really becoming a good influence and not spread fake news, but rather be of assistance to fact check the information and content that is being spread online. Maging good ambassadors tayo ng pag-exercise ng positive discourse. That way, when we sow good discourse, we also get it back. And in that process, we keep ourselves mentally healthy and mentally well. And you keep what you're spreading to the world. You get it back. Okay? So, yan.
Okay, thank you very much po, Sir Gab. No? Napakaganda po ng inyong mensahe para sa ating mga kaguruan. So ayan, mga ma'ams and sirs na nanonood po sa atin ngayon, maging ambassador po tayo ng good information. No? So ayan po, again, thank you very much po for enlightening us today, Sir Gab, no, on disinformation, misinformation, malinformation, and lahat po ng mga advice and tips nyo. Makakatulong po talaga ito sa amin dito po sa Department of Education. And at makakatulong po ito para maging responsible media consumer po kaming lahat. Okay, so to close po our webinar, let us call in Director Renilda Co for her message and ways forward.
Sige, maraming salamat, Jo, no, at sa ating mga kasamahan. Thank you sa ating speaker, kay Gab. No? Gab, thank you for the information. No? Marami kaming napulot, pati ako, nakikinig ako ng mahusay doon sa mga actually tips, no, ng pagtingin talaga, paano ba ito talaga na may mararamdaman mo na may fake news. Yon. So, sana po may mga natutunan kayo kasi hindi lang ito, no, para sa atin, mga sarili, pero dahil ito ay, kasi ang tao, communicator di ba? Hindi lang sa verbal, but we want to share what we learn, di ba? What we know, ganon. And kahit yung mga emotions natin, di ba, via what we read, kung sa napektuhan tayo ng binasa nito, gusto natin ipasa at lahat yung mga ganon. So, nakakaano rin yun, yung information, misinformation, nakaka-trigger. Kumbaga, nagka-cascade ka rin ng emotions kung hindi yan matino ang pinanggagalingan na sources. So marami pong purposes, no, yung lecture sa atin ni Sir Gab, no, at kasama na rin dito yung sinabi niya na sa mental health, no, kasi sabi nga niya, meron siyang aspeto ng kabuuan ng tao, no, na wag din yung buong araw yan na lang ang ginagawa mo din, di ba? Ganon. Then kahit na siguro yan ay puro naman totoo, no, ang mga sources at maganda, pero you also need the break, no? Yon. So maganda rin yon para mahasa mo rin, mapayabong yung ibang aspeto ng pagkatao. So with that, thank you. Hanggang sa susunod. na aming wellness check. Salamat Sir Gab at sa ating mga guro at mga nanonood ngayon. Maraming salamat.
Thank you very much po Director Ronnie, Sir Gab, Ms. KZ, and to all our participants po sa ating Wellness Check Series episode ngayong umagang to. Sana po yung lecture natin ngayon ay makatulong sa atin para mas maging vigilant tayo po sa pag-check ng information na nakukuha po natin sa iba't ibang social media sites. So pagtulungan po tayo sa paglaban po sa disinformation, misinformation, and malinformation para po maprotektahan na din natin ang ating mental health. Para po tayo ay wellness check na check. Maraming salamat po sa inyong pagsubaybay. Muli po ito si Joel Yamado, ang kasama niyo po sa pagpapanatili at pagpapalaganap ng Wellness Check na Check.